All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone across the globe joining us today. This is Gigi Anderson from Acquia. Today's webinar is Think Bigger. Your digital experience is more than your website, with Justin Eman from Third and Grove and Tom Wentworth from Acquia. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any audio issues, please send them to Q&A tab and I'll make sure to assist you. And if you have any questions for the presenters, please submit them to the Q&A tab as well, and we'll have them answered at the close of the presentation. You have a great hour in store for you. Slides and recordings of this webinar will be posted to acquia.com and will also be sent to you via email within the next few days. So without further ado, I'd love to pass it over to Tom.
Thanks, Gigi. Hey, Justin, how are you this morning?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. We just enjoyed a great off the mic conversation. So hopefully we can continue our enthusiastic conversation with today's webinar, Think Bigger. So let's get started. So as Gigi mentioned, my name's Tom. I run the product marketing organization here at Acquia, and I am thrilled to be joined by Justin, the CEO of Third and Grove. Justin, what should we know about you?
I'm the CEO and co-founder of Third and Grove. We're a digital agency. We're in Boston and San Francisco, and we work with a lot of mid-market and enterprise clients on redesigning, reimagining their online experiences.
Awesome. All right, so let's get started. So we're going to talk today about the emergence of what I think of as the experience economy. This is something that was sort of coined in a Harvard Business Review article about a decade ago. But I think it's real now, and I think it's especially real as it applies to the digital relationships that we have with our customers. So we're going to talk all about that. We're going to talk about how the digital experience market is evolved. We're going to talk about this new concept called a DXP, or digital experience platform. We're going to talk about why we think an open DXP is the right digital experience platform for your organization. And then we'll talk a little tiny bit at the very end about Acquia. But mainly today, our takeaway for you, the audience, is that we want to get you fired up about the opportunity to rethink how you engage with your customers across all of these digital channels, and making sure that you're thinking about holistically about the best ways to be able to go do that. And we're going to make the case, we hope, that the way you can do that effectively is through this idea of a digital experience platform. Anything else to add, Justin?
No, that sounds great.
All right, let's go. So as I mentioned, I believe we're in the experience economy now. And I think, again, this is something that Harvard, an HBR article talked about a decade ago. And I'm going to point to an example of Princess Cruise Lines, right? They happen to be an Acquia customer. And I'm not a big cruise fan myself. I have a daughter, so all I get to go to is Disney. I guess Disney has cruises, so maybe I should look into that a little bit. But Princess Cruise Lines has a new capability where they have a sort of device that you can set up when you go on board a ship. And that device knows your preferences. It knows if you're celebrating something special. It knows your favorite drinks at the bar, and they use this device to dynamically change the experience as you walk through the ship. So you literally can walk up to a bar, and this device will know that your favorite drink is a glass of Pinot Noir. When you go check into your room, you don't have to use a room key. The device, of course, knows who you are, and it will send you personalized messages at your check-in to remind you of things like excursions you've got sent out the next day. You know, all of this is personalized one-to-one for everyone on the ship. And I think that's the sort of expectation that brands need to create in order to win in this experience economy. And I think that experiences surround us every moment, right? Everything that we do, this webinar that you're experiencing right now as an Acquia experience that we're providing to you, right? I think if we think about all the times that brands are engaging with us in some fashion, we are constantly surrounded by experiences. And, you know, marketers say, this is a stat that comes from Gartner, 81% of marketers say they expect to be competing mostly or only on the basis of customer experience going forward. It's really hard to win with the best product, right? it's a game that's hard to play. It's really hard to win with the lowest price, right? It's a difficult game to play. I believe the only way that you can win consistently and forever is by constantly focusing on delivering the best experience, no matter what industry you're in. And I think a fantastic example of that, and this is what Justin and I were talking about before the webinar started, is Shake Shack. Shake Shack sells hamburgers and French fries. Like literally every one of us, on our Saturday afternoon barbecue can grill up some hamburgers and fry up some French fries. Like this is as commoditized as a product as there is. Yet Shake Shack and its CEO, Danny Meyer, who's a phenomenal, inspirational leader and someone who revolutionized the restaurant industry and is now revolutionizing the fast food industry through Shake Shack. Shake Shack, I don't think Shake Shack has the best hamburgers. I'm a huge In-N-Out Burger fan. If I fly to the West Coast, I'm all about In-N-Out Burger. I don't think they're winning, say, the lowest product, right? That's White Castle or whoever it is, right? But I do believe that Shake Shack provides the best experience. This is something that Danny Meyer, the CEO, is so important to the organization. He wrote a book about it, and it was, in their S1, which companies file to go public. It was a big part of why investors should invest in Shake Shack. It's not because they build the best hamburgers with the freshest tomatoes and the best cheese. It's because they're going to win with the best experience. And I often ask myself, in the physical world, there's lots of Shake Shacks. There's the Ritz-Carlton, there's Disney, right? I can think of all these amazing experiences that I have in the physical world, but I challenge myself and I would challenge all of you listening, what are the best experiences that you've had in the digital world? And can you even think of any? Like, what are these moments that you've experienced online that are like a Shake Shack moment? And I think not enough of those experiences exist today, and I think that needs to change.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, can I add one thing about that?
You can, of course.
So there's this awesome story in his book, Setting the Table, and it goes along with this experience, and it's called The Lesson is Writing Your Own Ending. And so Danny was talking about how he was in one of his restaurants, and Tom Brokaw was a regular at his restaurants, and Tom saw Danny at the restaurant and pulled Danny aside and said, "Hey, Danny, I wanted to let you know I was in one of your other restaurants last night, and there was a bug in my salad, and I just wanted to let you know that happened so you can sort of look into it." And so Danny apologizes to Tom Brokaw. He goes back into the kitchen. He says to the chef, he goes, "I don't care what they order. I want you to make a huge salad, and I want you to put this little index card right on top of the salad. And on the index card, he writes something on it and gives the chef the index card." So this big salad comes out 20 minutes later to Tom Brokaw's table. And the front of the card, the index card says Ringo. And Tom Brokaw picks up the index card and he's like, "Why does this card say Ringo?" And he flips it over and there's a note from Danny that says, "I didn't want the other restaurant to be the only place where you got a beetle in your salad." And the great lesson here is that Tom Brokaw was always going to tell a story about finding an insect in one of the Danny Meyer restaurants. But now, every time he tells that story, he ends it with that funny anecdote. And instead of being horrified about the restaurants, you want to go to a Danny Meyer restaurant. And that's all about the experience of writing your own ending.
Awesome. And I think Disney's another great example. And I think the challenge here is it's not good enough to create one experience, like a random active experience isn't good enough. The world's greatest brands are created on the backbone of decades of great experiences. It's why a brand like Disney pays so much attention to all the minutia and minute details that make up, say, your experience going to visit Star Wars Land at Hollywood Studios. It's why they carefully obsess with everything, because it does take a lifetime of great experiences to create the kind of iconic brand that consumers will come back to month after month, year, decade, generation. And I think, again, that doesn't exist in digital today. What does exist in digital is the ability to destroy iconic brands with a single bad experience. I had another example in here until this week. We saw yet another hack. Capital One exposed a whole bunch of, millions of credit card applications with lots of personal information encapsulated inside of them through a bad configuration of a web application firewall. And, as somebody who's, I'm a big travel person, always looking for travel-oriented credit cards. And if somebody's in the market for a credit card, Capital One's not in my short list anymore. And I think it takes, it's really hard to build a brand. And when you have one, a single bad experience, whether it's, a website crashing on Super Bowl Sunday, or whether it's, a hack at a place like Capital One, or even if it's just a website that's too hard to navigate, or the content's out of date, or the pictures aren't working. Like, it's so easy to deliver. It's so hard to create a great experience, but it's so easy to deliver a terrible one, right? And I think it's hard to create digital experiences. That's why I think we don't see more of these iconic Shake Shack style, Disney style experiences online. And here are some of the reasons why I think it's hard. And I think it's mostly hard because it's one thing for Shake Shack to be able to own the experience when you walk into one of their retail locations. But in the digital world, customer journeys are ridiculously complex, right? So it might have been 20 years ago, I just had to worry about having a great website. But the reality is I start off on a website in the morning. I'm then interacting with that brand through social platforms like Instagram. Maybe later, I'm interacting with them through a dedicated mobile app. Maybe at night, I'm having a voice experience. So the explosion of channels that are both mature channels like websites, and then channels that didn't even exist a few years ago like voice, to all the new channels that we haven't even invented yet, it's really hard to be able to deliver this great experience when your customer is everywhere and you don't get to own all the places that your customers are engaging with you. And I think from a technology standpoint, the technology that's been invented to help solve this problem has solved some of the problems, but it's created new ones, right? So these days, every organization at scale has a web content management system to manage their website, hopefully Acquia. You have a CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot to store all your customer data. You have email marketing tools ranging from MailChimp all the way up through some things like Marketo and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. If you sell things, you have commerce platforms like BigCommerce and ElasticPath. Of course, everybody has tools they use to engage with their social channels. So we have all these tools independently work on parts of that customer journey, but each of them has its own view of that customer journey, right? So when you look at how this translates back into the real world, so every one of these tools that you're using in your organization to try to help better deliver that customer experience has its own view of the world. These views are siloed. In fact, it's actually often worse because not only are the tools siloed, but organizations are siloed. You have a web marketing team, an email marketing team, an e-commerce team, a social team, and each of these teams operates often independently. So here you have your customers who look down and they don't want to have to worry about, am I engaging with the social marketing team or the email marketing team? They just see the company or brand. Yet organizationally, because of MarTech, we're often organized in a way that makes it impossible to deliver a consistent customer experience because the tools are fragmented. So think about this today, right? Your website has its own data. Your website has its own content, and your website delivers experience through channels like websites and mobile apps. You have email marketing platforms. They have their own data. They have their own content, and they have their own channels like email. Same with e-commerce, same with social, same with CRM. So you wonder why it's difficult to deliver on that promise of an exceptional digital experience, a Disney-like digital experience. It's hard to do that when your content, your website's different than your content on an email, or the customer data you have in your e-commerce platform is not connected with your email system, right? And then for a lot of organizations, it actually makes it even worse because now we're talking about, imagine you're a global brand like Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer, and you have this problem now scaled across the 1,000 brands you have, which differ regionally in different countries. So you have an exponential complexity of, I have all these problems of silos now times 1,000, right? So these are the sort of technological limitations and organizational limitations that make it really hard to deliver on the promise of that great experience. Of course, the obvious answer and what we'd like to talk to you about today is that in order to deliver on the promise of a great digital experience, you have to break down these silos. You have to have one view of your customer, no matter how they engage with you, and understanding that it's going to be the journey's like a plate of spaghetti. It's going to weave its way in and out of all these channels, often in the same 20 minutes, right? You need to have a consistent content across all of these. The fact that your email marketing team is saying different things in your website, that's not optimal, clearly. And you need to have one way to deliver the best personalized experience to all of these channels consistently, so that you really are delivering on that promise of a one-to-one customer experience, right? So I think eliminating the silos, both from a technological perspective and even from an organizational perspective, is the only way that organizations can really start to solve that, or to recognize the opportunity that comes with delivering great experiences. And we want to be able to think about the same capabilities, not just for one site, but if you're a multi-brand company, or if you're a company that sells in lots of countries, right, being able to make these repeatable so that not only can you have a consistent view of your data and content, but you can launch campaigns faster, you can market new products faster, you can enter new countries faster, you can take advantage of new emerging channels faster. All of these things are possible if you rethink the underlying technology that you're using to deliver experiences today. And why doing this is better for you: it gives you faster time to market, which we talked about. It gives you improved governance, because now you don't have to worry about all the moving parts of, is my content the same everywhere? It gives you a much more actionable set of data, so you can make automated decisions. It gives you a 360-degree view of your customer, sort of the dream, but the dream that hasn't yet been realized for most organizations. There's all sorts of reasons why having that single view is just a must-have in the new experience economy. And with that, and this may seem obvious, but like 20 years ago, the web content management space, the CMS space, whatever we call it, existed or came to be because everyone needed a website. And because everyone needed a website, they needed a better way to manage putting that website together, right? And that's why Drupal was created, and it's why the web content management market existed. But today, having a website isn't enough, right? As we've just talked about. And it's our deep-seated belief at Acquia, and certainly Justin, the Third and Grove team, agree that just like everyone needs a website, everyone now needs a digital experience platform. And we happen to strongly believe in the idea of open, and we'll talk a lot about that. So if you're thinking about, I already have a CMS and I'm doing great at managing content on my website, yeah, that's great, but you're solving one problem. You're not solving the problem of the experience economy we started this presentation with. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Justin, who's going to walk to the next level of depth into what you need to do to start putting together a digital experience platform.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. That was great. So yeah, just to build on what Tom said, DXP is sort of a new term. Some people say, well, aren't we just talking about CMS? And really what we're trying to say is a DXP is a product, it is a platform, it is a solution, but really it's really more of a strategy, and it's a way to think about how to engage with your customers. So a CMS is a good tactical solution. A DXP really represents thinking in a more strategic perspective about how you're going to interact with your customers to achieve whatever that goal is, whether it's B2B lead gen or driving foot traffic to stores or retail outlets, or generally engaging with visitors and information or careers or recruiting, whatever those goals are. The whole idea of a DXP is really more around a strategic perspective on how to approach a problem, whereas just thinking about, I just need a CMS, that's really a tactical solution, and that's going to be as limited as any single individual tactical solution. So we want to talk about some of the considerations when you're going to go through and think about DXP. So if you're ready to sort of think through this process or re-platform or sort of embrace a digital experience platform, then there's a bunch of considerations you need to really to think about to get that whole perspective. And we're going to go through those and give you some advice on things that I've learned working with all of our clients and sort of going through this process to help them think in sort of a different way and sort of achieve better towards those goals than they have before with sort of just a series of tactics. So the first one I want to talk about is web content management. So web CMS is obviously still the foundation of any DXP that you're going to put together, right? Content, the old phrase, content is king, right? This is the storage for that, the way it's going to be displayed to the world. It's still foundational, but it's also, because it's foundational and crucial and going to be used in so many ways, it's probably best to focus on use cases and really look at use cases when evaluating the CMS portion of the DXP. So you've got to think about what that editorial backend experience is going to be like. So, does your marketing team want a page build? What's the experience like editing content? You've got to think about multilingual. Do you need multiple languages? Do you need multiple languages and locales? Do you need French in Haiti and French in France? Are you going to plug into a translation system? Are you going to be using an external translation tool? Is there a translation workflow? And then broadly, just what the editorial workflow is, right? So really understanding, like, can anyone publish content? Does it have to go through legal review? Does it have to go through product review? We worked with a client that actually can't release a content change to their website until they get approval from the government of Mexico. And so because they're in a very highly regulated industry. So you really have to understand what those crucial sort of use cases are. And there's many when you're looking at CMS, but those are some of the key ones. And make sure you understand those on how they map to the potential, CMS solution that you're going to use. And then also we're going to be talking about future trends in a couple of minutes, but another one you have to think about with CMS is, are you set up for, potentially going headless at some point in the future, or sort of a hybrid approach with headless, which is sort of a new emerging trend and sort of a microservices movement around CMS. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, but those are all important considerations for CMS. So the next, key consideration when you're thinking about a DXP is multi-channel delivery. And multi-channel delivery is really just content that's being distributed in multiple places. So Tom showed a couple of slides where we talked about not just a website, but a web app. So you could have a web app here, you could have a customer portal, you could have an internal employees portal, you could be sending micro content to social channels like Twitter, it'd be going into ads, email campaigns, personalization engines, there's voice search, there's just lots of different outlets for that content now. So you have to have a multi-channel strategy. You have to think through what that strategy is going to be so you can sort of understand what your DXP sort of needs to support in that area. And really the key thing that we try to say to our clients with this one is think of content as a service. So operationalize content a little more in your mind and think about it more as, I'm not just creating content and what that experience that needs to be polished, but I'm also distributing and sending content and enabling other people to be able to use that content in the organization to sort of do what they need to do. And you're going to be pushing out that content to sort of multiple places. So you have to talk to those stakeholders and sort of understand what that is. A key thing here is to make sure that you have an API first strategy, because to distribute that content, it's going to go to external systems, and having an API is a common language for those two systems to communicate. So if you have a platform that's really committed to an API first strategy and being open with distributing that content and not requiring a sort of proprietary mechanism to share that content, and really sort of embracing ideologically that it's important to be able to share that content with other platforms, then you're going to be able to deliver on whatever your multi-channel strategy needs to be to sort of execute. The next one is cross-channel. So cross-channel is multi-channel. There's content in multiple places, but it's when you throw data at the problem and try to use content through multiple channels with a persona or a person, right? So really it just means you have content in one place that's being distributed to 10 different places, but a cross-channel strategy is, okay, well, now that we're distributing that content successfully, how are we going to tell sort of a cohesive content story when one persona sort of flows through multiple touch points? And so the exercise that's really crucial here is twofold. One is mapping a customer journey. That's probably something you've heard before. That's just going to be mapping out every step of the process. And that's outside of the website, right? So maybe your customer journey starts, or one of your journeys, or one of your personas, one of your sort of key prospect sort of types. Maybe they start by getting an email, then that drives them to a landing page, then they explore other pages on the site, maybe they leave the site, they see an ad later, that drives them back to a different area of the site, and then maybe eventually they get to a lead gen form or a contact us or something. So that customer journey is multiple touch points, multiple devices, multiple sort of experiences. And you map that out, map each sort of step, and then really just, it's really simple, but it's really crucial. The second part is mark each of those steps red, yellow, or green, right? Is there friction at that step? Is it sort of neutral? Is it not great, but not bad? Or does it really bring delight, right? Is it really effective? It works really well. It's, we've measured it. We can tell, it's engaging, it's fine. And the key here then with that mapping is to do two things when you're thinking about what your DXP actually needs to be. You want to maintain the delight. You don't want to go backwards, but you really want to fixate on fixing the friction, because those are the opportunities to move the needle, right? So those red stages that really it's just not great, or it's not personalized, or it's not engaging, or it doesn't flow well, or whatever the problem is, whatever that friction is, come up with how you're going to fix each of those, those reds, each of those frictions, and then use that to say, okay, great, now our DXP needs to support whatever solutions we've come up with to turn all of those reds to at least a yellow. That's serious progress. It'd be great to turn them to green, but incremental step, just getting all that friction to sort of neutral, that alone is going to be sort of a big move. So when you're thinking about a cross-channel strategy, you've got to map out your key 3, 4, 5 customer journeys, and you've got to put each of those stages or steps into, red, yellow, green, friction, neutral, or delight, and sort of maintain that delight, focus on the friction, and use those friction solutions as to make sure that your DXP is going to sort of fit in with that strategy.
Justin, what are some examples of red stages? Like, what are some of the most common examples that you think people experience today?
Yeah, I mean, one that we, honestly see a lot is simple stuff like a lack of really good, robust QA testing on like an email campaign. So they get the email, it's not really well formatted for the device, and then it leads to a page that maybe needs a better mobile experience. The key takeaway there is, and what we like to say a lot in meetings is, the oldest millennial is 38, and I know that because I'm 38, right? And the oldest millennial at 38, they're getting into senior positions at organizations, and they're making major decisions at organizations now. In terms of the arc of their career, the millennials are entering that tier, and they expect these experiences to be good on their phone, because I only shop on my phone. I don't shop on like a desktop computer. And if it doesn't work well on my phone, I'm probably just going to go use something else, right? So that alone is a red step, right? Like you don't really have good mobile engagement, but somebody standing at a line at Starbucks that got your email and is looking at that email, and maybe they're going to read the white paper. If that white paper is a PDF or it doesn't work well on a phone, you're going to lose potentially that prospect, because that was your moment to sort of engage with them.
Yeah, Justin, I'm a Gen X, so I still use a big print catalog, like one of those big, thick print catalogs. That's how I shop. So it's a data point. Thank you.
Of course. All right, great. The next one's campaign management. So this is a really important consideration. If you do and execute campaigns, most organizations do. So email campaigns are usually the most common form, email, but it could be other mediums. But email is the gift that keeps on giving, or the pain that won't go away, like depending on your perspective. But like Slack didn't, eliminate email. Everyone comes out with a new email killer, but really email still paves the way. And email companies are still, tools that sort of leverage email as a medium to communicate with prospects and customers, and potential customers are effective and work well and drive value for organizations. So it's here to stay. It's sort of not going anywhere in the near or medium term. So when you think about your campaign management, though, you got to take a step back, because it really involves a couple of systems that interact in multiple ways. And so, your email or your campaign might drive to a landing page right on your site. So that's going to impact your CMS, your web content system. Personalization is going to be key here for driving real value out of campaigns. So telling a better, more personal, engaging story to individual prospects. That's going to be key both in, the email or the outreach portion of the campaign, as well as the second, third, and fourth steps in the campaign, whether that's on your CMS or sort of other places. Or other parts of the website off the landing page, and then your marketing tool, right? So whatever your like like Acquia is with Mautic, whatever marketing tool you're using to sort of execute these campaigns, all three of those have to work really well together. So you've got to look at those three pieces. What is your strategy? How do they need to interact? Where's the data coming from? Where's the content coming from? What are the teams involved? What are the stakeholders? Do they have a seat at the table? What do they care about? What isn't working for them today? What is working? And really go through that exercise to really understand what is the campaign strategy, what needs to be optimized about it, is it being measured for success? And then when you have all of that really clear, then you can go say, okay, great. Given that, how does that plug into a potential DXP, platform that we're going to choose, and sort of how does it hit those points and sort of execute on those? The next one is commerce. And there's really awesome stuff happening in commerce right now. So we like to say that we're in the third wave of commerce platforms. And recently, within really the last 18 months is really when that's really happened. Previous to this, in the second wave, the big disruptor in the second wave was Magento. And this was a great mid-market and enterprise solution at a good price point, where you could highly customize a commerce solution for an organization with, medium to really large sort of commerce flow. And what Magento did in the second wave, and it wasn't a cloud solution, they don't have a cloud strategy, but it was sort of on-premises, custom code control, took a lot of infrastructure to run, took a lot of work to sort of customize, but it solved a problem at a price point a whole order of magnitude lower than some of the other big players that dominated the first era. So think about IBM's solution, and HP has one, and Oracle has one with ATG, now it's been renamed. So all of those really dominated the first wave. Magento comes along, and suddenly you can do things that you would have had to use Hybris for SAP's Hybris at a quarter of the budget, right? You can't do anything with Hybris under $1 million, but you can do the same thing in Magento probably for 250. And that, we like to say Hybris is for clients with big budgets and low expectations for exactly that kind of reason. So Magento did really well in that second phase. But what happened about 18 months ago is the cloud platforms really matured at the mid-market and enterprise level. And you have solutions on the headless side like Elastic Path, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes, but on the non-headless stuff, directly competing with Magento like BigCommerce and Shopify Plus. And these are cloud native applications that are really disrupting Magento the same way Magento sort of disrupted that first wave, which is now with BigCommerce or Shopify, you don't have to do anything on the back end because that's in the cloud and sort of done for you. You can spend, usually 2/3 of the budget to do the same kind of experience because you can focus on the front end and you can use their great app ecosystem and sort of get to market quicker. And then the dollars you save, you can spend on marketing. So there's really two crucial things here. If you have a commerce component in your whole experience, you've got to really understand first this disruption that's really happening. Because today, with the platforms, that it used to be, should we use Magento? Now the question is, is there a reason we can't use BigCommerce or Shopify? And that's really, really disruptive there. The second big piece, though, to understand and ask yourself is, do I have a browse and buy experience? And browse and buy is how you describe your regular, I have products, I do a search, I have a landing page, I add a couple of SKUs to a cart, I apply a coupon code, and I check out. That is browse and buy. That's traditional commerce. Something that isn't browse and buy is like Ticketmaster. Right? Ticketmaster is absolutely digital commerce because they have a huge volume of transactions that they do online, and obviously it's crucial and vital to their business, but it's not really a browse and buy experience. You don't sort of buy 3 different concert tickets and put on a coupon and sort of check out. Really, it's all about one concert, how many tickets, what section, comparing sections and prices, and how it's going to look to sit in that seat and sort of see the stage and where the stage is going to be and what that whole experience is like. So it's commerce, but it's not browse and buy. And so you have to ask yourself, are my commerce requirements browse and buy, or are they not? And when you answer that question, then it becomes easy to say, okay, great, I need to go towards a BigCommerce or Shopify Plus if I'm browse or buy, or if I'm not a browse and buy experience, I probably need to look at something like in Elastic Path, which is a headless commerce solution, to sort of build a custom experience, on sort of the CMS or experience side of things and sort of plugging commerce in. So you've got to think through those two considerations and sort of understand that disruption to have a good sense of what the strategy is, and then sort of apply that to your overall DXP efforts. I think the third thing is, the next one is customer data. So consideration is customer data. So this one is less about a strategy to collect and store and more about a strategy to extrapolate and execute. So, we could do a whole webinar on data and sort of a lot of considerations, but the big takeaway and the big thing that we sort of work with clients on is forget about a strategy about how you're going to collect and store the data, because that's an important question to answer later. The first question is, what kind of insights and how are you going to extrapolate them? But then just as crucially, how are you going to execute on those insights? Because you can extrapolate insights all day long, but if you don't have, resources and time and a strategy to sort of execute on those insights, then there's really no point in extrapolating those insights and spending those resources. So you've really got to focus on extrapolation and execution, not a strategy of collection and storage. Once you know what that strategy is, how you're going to get the insights, and then how you're going to drive those into improving your metrics, and whether it's on an email campaign or on a landing page on your website or some other part of the experience. Once you have that strategy, then you can say, okay, great. Now that we have that strategy, what do we need to do to collect in store? What are going to be the tools involved, and how is that going to touch the whole DXP platform in terms of getting the data we need to sort of execute on that strategy? I think the last key consideration for a DXP is this idea of working backwards. And this comes from some of the best advice I ever read in business. And it's really start with the end in mind. It's a really powerful exercise to do. Any kind of personal goal or business goal or anything like that, just start with where you want to end up, right? Whether it's in life and maybe you want to buy a house in 5 years, or whatever it is, right? Like, start with what that end is and then work backwards in terms of how you get there. And it's so much easier to achieve a goal working backwards than it is forwards, because it's so much clearer on what you have to do to get there and sort of define how to get there. And I bring this up for DXPs because one thing I sort of like to characterize this or say about this is when is the last time a payroll system innovated? Right? The last time a payroll system innovated was probably the late 90s when they came out with direct deposit. And that was like really innovative in 1995 or whatever year that technology came out. I don't know. But payroll systems haven't changed, right? You just want your money to be transferred into your bank account, and that's it. That's success for a payroll system. But there was a time when they were innovative and interesting and things were happening. And we're in that time now. And if you asked anyone in 1980 what would be really great about a payroll system, or whenever direct deposit didn't exist, it'd probably be hard for someone to say, oh, I think in 5 years direct deposit is going to exist, and that's going to be the big innovation in payroll systems. The whole point here is that the future is unknowable. And if you really believe that you have really know what's going to happen in the future, then you're going to have an interesting future, I think. But if you embrace the fact that, hey, I can make some educated guesses and assertions and some trends, but you accept that the future is mostly unknowable, then you can work backwards from that assertion and say, okay, well, I need a DXP that's going to be adaptive here, because there's going to be something in 2 years when I've committed to this new DXP platform, and something is going to change. There's going to be a new tool. We are in the era where there's just a ton of innovation of digital right now. And so you have to set yourself up to know that, hey, in 2 years, there's going to be something I'm going to really care about that I didn't even know existed today. And really the only way to set yourself up for that kind of success is an open approach to a DXP, is a platform that is driven from its core to be open, so that it is designed to be disrupted. It's designed for something new to be plugged in that it doesn't know about today. If you have a good, solid, open strategy from an ideological perspective in your DXP, then you're going to be set up to sort of handle that disruption that's going to inevitably happen in the future. So I want to talk a little briefly about 3 trends that we think are really interesting when you're thinking about a DXP that are sort of happening right now. So those were the major considerations that we go through, but we also like to call out some trends that we're seeing with our clients. We have a good perspective across multiple organizations and things that are happening, and so we sort of like to share just things that we're seeing that we think potentially should impact the thinking or selection process or considerations for DXP. So the first one is this idea of agile marketing, and this is just starting to, I think, be sort of have some cultural, broadly awareness in the marketing community. But many people are familiar with agile development. And what happened with agile development is it was a different way to make software. So up until, I think about 2005, every organization developed software using the waterfall method. So a series of highly structured steps, one after the other, that led to a solution. And the challenges with the waterfall method is you would start a project that would be 3 years long with a bunch of assertions and opinions that were valid when you started, but when you deliver in 3 years or 2 years or even a year, those opinions, the facts on the ground have changed, those assertions are different, and it's really hard to adapt the solution because you've been executing a fixed vision for a long time. And agile software development was really created to solve that problem, to make an adaptive development process that could handle things that disrupted original assertions or opinions or, changing business priorities, climate, whatever. It was really a system that could handle, it sort of accepted that that change happens. And so here's a different way you need to make software to sort of deal with that if you're willing to accept that that's the reality. And so now today, I think 95% of corporate America uses agile development. It's really astonishing how completely replaced waterfall has been in software development. What we're now seeing is that same sort of ideological approach being applied to marketing. So this is really about less big strategies and big releases and big timelines, and more small releases and rapid learning and small refinements and sort of continuously iterating. So it's this idea that, a marketing strategy should be more executed in sort of weeks, not months and months, right? And spend a few weeks, execute a strategy, measure it. Did it work? Yes. It didn't not work? Great. Learn from that and sort of iterate and just sort of keep going. With doing it in sort of these small chunks, it's easy to adapt when an institutional sort of institutional prerogative changes or a major event happens. And we always hear about this in the context of one of the biggest challenges we always hear about is low developer velocity. So when we talk with marketing teams, they often express frustration that they just don't feel like they can make changes quick enough, or their development team can make changes quick enough to their website to sort of deal with the pace of things that they need to execute. And so you can and should really look at agile marketing if you're not familiar with it, because it's a bit of a paradigm shift into sort of how to drive better value from marketing energy. But you really aren't going to succeed with it unless you can achieve high developer velocity, because it does just require a DXP that allows you to sort of move quicker through refinements and changes. And as we'll talk about in a couple of minutes in the third trend, this has a big, this is really related to sort of the headless disruption that is potentially happening in the CMS space. So the second trend I wanted to call out is commerce. And I really talked about this one at length before, so I won't really go into this one, but I sort of talked about what's happening with the third wave and sort of headless, but it's really just important to understand what's happening with those platforms and how quickly the reality is changing there, and then how mature some of the headless options are. So it's so much easier now to plug in commerce into situations that aren't strictly browse and buy sort of experiences. So that is a major trend. I've talked about it at length, but you really have to have a good handle on it. If you have commerce as a component of your digital experience, you've really got to have a good understanding of what's happening there. And the third trend I wanted to call out is this headless or decoupled or hybrid approach. And so I love bringing up this car boat here. So this is a car that's also a boat. And the idea is you could drive to the lake, and then you could drive into the lake on a nice summer day and go boating. And every decade somebody tries to make a car boat. The problem is that when you try to make something that's a great car and a great boat, you get something that's a lousy car and a lousy boat. And this happens time and time again when you try to make the car boats. The same thing when people try to make airplanes that are also cars. You just get a lousy airplane and a lousy car. It's also why I won't eat at a restaurant with two cuisines, because it's really hard to be good at two things. And so, this is a very early emerging trend, but we are seeing organizations start to embrace a microservices-driven architecture from a on their digital experience side, and they want to think about, well, could we decouple and use a modern technology like, say, JavaScript on the front end experience? And this is potentially pretty disruptive. It's still early days here, but it's a really interesting thing that's happening. And so you've got to make sure that whatever DXP strategy you execute with, you are setting yourself up to potentially have to do something around this in a couple of years. Some organizations are going with it today. Some don't think it's a good fit, and the technology is maturing. But this really goes back to what I was saying about the future is unknowable. This could be something that you're going to really want to do in 2 years. And so you've got to make sure that you have a good DXP that sort of embraces that open architecture. And that sort of brings us really to the next slide on sort of open DXP and sort of what Tom and I were talking about, which is this idea that the underlying ideology of the way this platform is built and put together really needs to embrace an open architecture for sort of all the reasons that we saw in terms of the trends that are happening, the fact that the future is unknowable, and the fact that you're going to be plugging in lots of different tools to really have an effective DXP. You have to have one that's comfortable, that doesn't embrace the restrictions of a lock-in, and really sort of embraces being a collection of sort of best of breed components for your particular strategy that you're trying to execute. So with that, I will hand it back to Tom.
So thanks, Justin. I hope at this point, we're now 44 minutes in, that we've made the case for why we're in the experience economy, why we believe to the depth of our hearts that winning with experience is the right way for all of us to win together. Justin articulated all the things that you need to be able to do to deliver the kinds of world-class experiences that we talked about earlier. So now we'd like to talk to you just a little bit about how you can get started in doing that with Acquia. So, as we've talked about and we sort of teased, we think there is a better way. I used to despise the idea of a digital experience platform because like didn't make sense. It was a buzzword, but I really believe that it is the set of capabilities that every organization needs. And it's what we're trying to build at Acquia. We're trying to help our customers with a radically better way to be able to, repeat these world-class experiences that we can get in places like Shake Shack online. So what we're trying to help our customers with is bringing together all of the data that you have about your customers, whether it's behavioral data from a website, whether it's transactional data from a commerce application, whether it's third-party data from a DMP that you've bought or licensed. We want to help you connect all that data together so that you truly have a single view of your customer. We want to also help you bring together all of your content, because today, as we mentioned earlier, content is highly siloed. You have content that sits in your email system, it sits in your website, it sits in your social. We want to help organizations have one view of content, whether it's unstructured, structured, or rich media, and then help you get all that content to where it needs to go. And then lastly, we want to give you a unified way to be able to match, because you have the customer data, your customers, because you have all your content in one place, you can start thinking about the right content for that customer. And now we want to help you get that content to your customers in the right channel, no matter what that channel is, using well-established channels like web and email, all the way through headless at the bottom, which just means whatever the next thing is that's cool that hasn't been invented yet, we want to try to help there too, right? And that's what we think it takes to win. So this is our driving mission at Acquia, is to deliver products to our customers that help solve these problems. Here's just a quick look at what those products look like today. So our products are sort of broken up into two halves. We call it Experience Factory and a Marketing Hub. So at the bottom, we have our foundational technologies and flagship products. So Acquia Cloud and Acquia Cloud Site Factory. I'll start by mentioning, of course, that Acquia was founded by the gentleman Dries, who created the Drupal open source web content management product back in his dorm room in the early 2000s. And the business is built on being the place for organizations who've committed to Drupal for them to work with. And our products are all about helping organizations who want to run Drupal run it on the best platform for Drupal, whether it's a single site, which is our Acquia Cloud platform, or Acquia Cloud Site Factory, which we've designed specifically for organizations like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, who aren't worried about one site or two sites or three sites. They're worried about, I have hundreds to thousands of brands, right? So we have the best platform for running Drupal sites from 1 to 1,000. We've built the best Drupal distribution called Acquia Lightning. So we've taken Drupal, the open source Drupal, and we've added things to it that we think are valuable for organizations who are looking to solve some of the problems that we've talked about today. So we've sort of pre-configured Drupal in a way that works for mid-market enterprise organizations. And then on top of that, in our Marketing Hub, it is all about now that you have these foundational sets of technologies, how do you get better business outcomes from them? So whether it's Acquia Lift for website personalization, whether it's Mautic, a company in technology we acquired a few months ago that's about helping you build customer journeys that touch channels like email and text, whether it's our Commerce Manager, which helps us integrate with all the commerce platforms Justin talked about earlier. It's about helping you deliver better business outcomes by connecting that right content to the right person at the right time in the right channel. And then lastly, and this is foundationally the thing that we believe the most, so I'll end with this. We are in the experience economy. We do think this is the only way you can compete and win, and we hope you think so as well. We hope you believe that a digital experience platform sort of describes all the capabilities that you need in order to win with your digital experiences. And lastly, we think that DXP has to be open. And I applaud us, Justin, for not using the Scott Brinker, MarTech 5000 slide that is in everybody's presentation these days. but it's obvious that there's never been more technology available to organizations. And it's obvious that it's not just one or two or three products. It is literally thousands of products. And we think the only way that organizations can meet those needs is by picking a DXP that is open. However, open is more than open source. Acquia's foundation, from Dries, our founder, who founded Drupal, which is the largest open source project in the world measured by contributors, to Mautic, a company we acquired, which is the only open source marketing cloud. We have deep-seated roots in open source, and there are very few, if any, companies that are as committed to open source as Acquia is. And we think open source is a better way to build technology, because instead of one company working on a product, we have tens of thousands of people working on a product, and that results in better products and faster innovation. But it's also about being an open platform. So if you choose not to use every part of all the Acquia products I showed you in that previous slide, and we have great Acquia products, we think, across a lot of the dimensions that Justin talked about in his presentation. But if you choose to use Acquia's Open DXP alongside competitive products from Salesforce and Oracle or Adobe, or frankly from any of the products you have in the Scott Brinker MarTech 5000, that's great too. Because we want to be the open platform, because we're based on open source, because we care deeply about open APIs and being API first. We want to give our customers the tools they need to make all their existing technology investments work together better. Easy to say. And that's what we're building here. So we are foundationally both open source and an open platform. And we think that, frankly, we are the only open alternative to the DXP market today, which is comprised of a whole bunch of proprietary vendors who are trying to sort of lock you into the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave. And we want to be the open alternative to that. So with that, our last 3 points, Justin, I'll let you highlight these last 3 points.
Sounds great. So I covered a couple of high-level considerations. We have a really detailed checklist for DXP discovery. So if you're trying to identify a new digital experience platform, we have a whole really long detailed checklist on every sort of consideration and question you need to ask internally to sort of have a clear sense of what are the key things to think about. So that's at that URL. And then we have some, Tom posted some thoughts on what really the value of an open DXP is and sort of why it's important to your organization. So it's a great read, and that's that second link there as well.
Awesome. Well, wow, we went right to the end, which I'll be honest with you, surprised me a little bit, given how fast we both talk. But let me go ahead and just stop sharing here, and we'll take some questions from the audience. Okay. So question number 1. Can an organization get started with just Acquia Lightning and then add on Lift and other services as we're ready? Absolutely. I think digital experience platforms are a journey. I think for some organizations, sure. If you're ambitious, if you're committed, go try to tackle every problem together at the same time. We recommend sort of a crawl, walk, run approach. There are foundational investments you have to make, right? So you mentioned Acquia Lightning. You foundationally want to make sure you've got a great web content management platform, and Acquia Lightning is a great place to start. Adding on Lift to then extend your Drupal website with personalization is a great next step. You then might want to add in Mautic so you can start personalizing across emails and text as another channel. You might want to add in later Acquia Digital Asset Manager, right? So we would encourage you to think of your DXP as a journey. Follow-on question, can Acquia Lift be integrated with other CMS platforms, or does it only work with Drupal? The answer to that is yes. Sadly, there are other CMS platforms, and Acquia Lift does work with them. In fact, we have customers who use Acquia Lift and large customers, for a very large retailer as one example, who uses Acquia Lift on a non-Drupal site. So we've designed it in a way to be CMS neutral. And if you have any specific questions, we'd love to show you how. Okay, so let me go look at question answers. What's the biggest mistake, and I'm going to give this one to you, Justin. What's the biggest mistake you've encountered when helping your customers move to a DXP?
Yeah, I think when they've sort of tried and then have sort of done that experience and then sort of reached out to us, I think the biggest mistake we've encountered, two things. One is what I talked about earlier, just not accepting that the future is unknowable and things are going to change. And the second really is a lack of discovery. So you really have to do a healthy discovery process to do sort of a big project like this and really think through all the questions and talk to the stakeholders and customers and sort of do all that exploration that's really necessary. That checklist that we shared a link to, that has, I think, 60, 70 questions on it about, that you need to sort of think through to think about a DXP, and that's discovery. And you've got to do a good, I think, healthy discovery process to have a good, successful path forward.
And then we've got time for one more question, and this just came in. What's a digital experience look like in 2025? I'll let you take it first, Justin, and then I'll wrap it up.
Make me go first on this one?
Yes.
I think it's both going to look, similar in that there's still going to be a website. And then I think it's going to look different in terms of the way people interact. I think by then it's probably going to be probably as highest mobile as we're going to get, or sort of in terms of, how many people are just sort of interacting that way. So I would guess even more of the experience is going to be just mobile focused at that point. And I think voice, I'm not convinced that voice is going to be a crucial strategy in 2025 for a lot of use cases that I think voice is a little more limited in terms of its use cases than people that are excited about it today think. So I think actually maybe voice is a little bit less important in 2025.
Yeah, my take is I think it's hard to predict what it's going to look like next year. I think we're in an era of, you mentioned millennials. I think the pace of technology has never advanced faster. I think there are new platforms that emerge every day. We couldn't have predicted the rise of, pick whatever your favorite platform is. I won't even embarrass myself by trying to name them. But we're going to continue to see that. And I think it's going to be organizations who can reach their customers, who can consistently reach their customers in a personal way, no matter what the channel is. Yes, there'll be foundational channels, like we will still have a website and we will still use email, much to all of our dismay. Email is still going to exist. But I think it's going to be the companies that can embrace their customers wherever they are with these personalized messages are going to be the ones who continue to win. So I think the most important thing to prioritize is just constant innovation. Like the days of being able to sort of iterate once every 3 years or once every 5 years are gone. I think we're innovating on a monthly basis when it comes to thinking about our customers. And I think the platforms have to evolve. And I think organizationally, we have to evolve to be able to change faster. And I think the premise of always building the best experience, like the Shake Shack team has taught us, will still exist. But I think we will have to change as marketers and as digital experience practitioners to move faster, because we know our customers are going to. That's just not an option, right? So with that, let's go ahead and wrap it up. I want to thank all of you for attending. We hope you found this time valuable. Thank you so much for sharing the past 60 minutes with us. Justin, as always, I enjoyed this conversation with you, and thank you for your time today. And Gigi, anything else I should wrap up with?
Yeah, Tom, Justin, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic hour. Just one quick reminder that slides and recording of this webinar will be posted to Acquia.com and sent to everyone's email within the next few days. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to send them at marketing@theacquiateam.com. But thank you all for coming and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.